My name is Ivor Indyk. I'm the Whitlam Chair in the Writing and Society Research Centre at Western Sydney University. I think literature is fundamental to a robust political democracy, in as much as you think of democracy as being about debate, and as the ancients knew, about eloquence, intelligent discussion. And that's exactly what literature offers. It offers new and different perspectives on things. It challenges conventional ways of thinking, and it proposes possibilities that often people had never thought of. The real problem, I think, at the moment, as far as the relationship between literature and democracy is concerned, is that people tend to define democracy as the will of the greatest number. And as a result, literature, the value of literature, tends to be defined purely in terms of its popular appeal. The best books are the ones that have the largest popular appeal. They tend to be the ones that win prizes. Those that have limited public appeal, precisely because they're challenging, are the ones that are likely to be put to the side, or even worse, dismissed as elitist. I think that's a profound misunderstanding of the way literature works. I think what is true of literature is true of the arts sector in general. It proposes possibilities, it explores worlds that are different to ours, or maybe the same as ours, but on a slightly different axis. I think one of the great misconceptions is that art exists to entertain. As the Roman poet Horace understood, entertainment was only one part of the capacity of art. Instruction was the other part. Instruction sounds a bit moralistic to us, but I mean, basically, it's about making people more intelligent and more sensitive in relationship to the problems of the day. It's true that Giramondo titles are often difficult to sell in bookshops. They have small print runs. That's not exceptional to us. In a way, it's a judgment on our quality as a publisher. I often think that there's an inverse relationship between popularity and literary value. You know, the more challenging works are the ones which take longest to gather a public around them. But I don't think you should judge literature in terms of its sales. In fact, there's a certain temporality which attaches to literature, and indeed I think to all the arts. They have a different temporality to the one that we live by. A really important book, can go unknown or unrecognised for decades before its value becomes apparent to people. Difficult works that are dismissed because they're too difficult, can, in a few years, seem remarkably clear and straightforward. It's a kind of magic that they perform. So it's essential that we have ways of keeping books in print and find means by which we can deliver books to those who really understand them, rather than having them sitting on bookshelves in bookshops, often with their spine outs, in the forlorn hope that someone will come along and find them. I've always committed Giramondo to publishing a diversity of Australian authors to the ideal of cultural diversity. I'm of immigrant background myself, and so I've always made sure that writers from writers from diverse backgrounds that are working in styles or with forms of English that might be familiar to the mainstream are given full credit and visibility. It's fundamental to the nature of our culture because, after all, Australia is an immigrant country, and unless you recognise that its culture is still in the process of formation, it's also a young country, culturally speaking, in terms of immigration, though not in terms of its Indigenous culture, but in terms of that mix of Indigenous and immigrant. Australia is really in the very earliest stages of its formation, and unless one is really careful about cultivating all aspects of the culture, the richness, the true richness, which will become more and more apparent in time, will never be given a chance to develop. It's really important for the arts community to be supported by government policy. At the moment, the exclusion of arts workers from government support during the COVID crisis, I think, is astonishing and unbelievable. It does suggest that economic priorities completely ignore the priorities of art, which is entirely wrong-headed because the cultural sector in this country is more in need of economic support simply because culture doesn't pay in this country. And unless it receives proper support, it'll simply diminish to the point one fears of invisibility. In fact, from the point of view of government support in the COVID crisis, the arts are almost completely invisible to the government, and because of the restrictions on public gatherings, invisible to most people as well.